Dear students, welcome to session 3 of our HKICS student gathering. I'm Louisa Lau, Registrar of the Institute. Tonight, I'm pleased to have Dr. Davy Wu with us as our speaker. Welcome, Davy.
Thank you.
Davy is the Senior Lecturer in Law and the Program Director of Master in Science in Corporate Governance and Compliance at the Hong Kong Baptist University. He is also a member of the Assessment Review Panel of the Institute, Chair of the Governance and Compliance Review Group of the Chartered Governance Qualifying Program, that is our CGQP examinations. So tonight, the topic is about updates on CGQP examinations with all the law modules. I'm glad that we have students from both Hong Kong and mainland for tonight's session. As you may be aware that the CGQP was officially launched on 1st January 2020, and that it is an internationally recognized program with a curriculum developed by the Chartered Governance Institute, formerly the Institute of Chartered Secretaries and Administrators, ICSA, and that it is adapted by HKICS to meet local needs and applications. The CGQP has also been adopted by the Canadian, Malaysian, Singaporean, and the United Kingdom, Ireland, and related territories. In short, we call the UCRET divisions of the Chartered Governance Institute. With the launch of the CGQP, the Institute continues to enhance the learning support for our students, such as tonight, and that we also offer free of charge online study materials, and then you can access online to the pilot papers and mark schemes. And the regular examinations preparatory program held by the Hong Kong Youth Space and the examinations technique workshops are also in place. So without further ado, Dr. Davy Wu, please.
Thank you, Louisa. It's my great pleasure to come here tonight to introduce those 4 law and regulations related modules to all of you in Hong Kong and also in the mainland. Okay, shall we? Well, the usual disclaimer applies. I'm here to introduce the module. I'm not here to make any crystal ball predictions. I'm not an examiner, so I have no tips to share tonight. So it's only, I hope to give you some assistance to understand the syllabus. That's my purpose tonight. Okay, so we will first start with Hong Kong company law. Well, this module is designed to provide you a thorough knowledge of the legal framework governing especially registered company. Well, ladies and gentlemen, as a polygon, it has many faces. Accountants, lawyers, management consultants can see corporate governance in different ways. But from the legal perspective, this Hong Kong company law will give you the legal side or the legal face of governance. For example, Hong Kong EX, HKICS, defines effective board as one which can promote the long-term success of a company. But what a company can do will be defined by Hong Kong company law. You as a director, you cannot say that, well, I have a lot of cash, I want to pay a lot of dividends to my shareholders. But in Hong Kong, under Hong Kong company law, your company can only declare dividends if you have made distributable profits. It's not a matter of cash, it's a matter of whether you have a distributable profits. So what you can do and what you cannot do to promote the success of the company will depend on law. So that's why I would say this is one of the most important component of CG. And here comes the learning outcomes. And the learning outcomes are very important because when you study not just company law, but also say SM, RM, other courses, you have to make sure that you can satisfy the learning outcomes. For example, the first one, you understand the legal framework within which commercial organizations operate. But I want to make a remark here. Hong Kong company law applies not just to commercial companies. It also applies to charities, to national sports associations, and generally NGOs. You may know that in Hong Kong, we do not have charity law. We do not have laws for political parties. So in Hong Kong, charities, even sports associations, many of them, they're actually companies limited by guarantee. So make no mistake, Hong Kong company law applies to all businesses which are in the form of companies. And then secondly, demonstrate understanding of the roles and the duties of the directors. And you have to understand the composition and the structure of the board. Well, I personally think that this is perhaps the most important part, the most important learning outcome. You have to understand the roles and the duties of directors, because directors, they are the decision makers in the company. Whether the company is going down the right path, making the right decisions will depend on the people in the boardroom. And then thirdly, demonstrate an understanding of the internal rules and external regulatory environment which the companies are subject to regarding membership. You have to understand what internal rules are in place to protect the rights of the members. And also outside the company, what options are available to protect the members. Of course, internal rules, as far as internal rules are concerned, we start with the Articles of Association. And outside the company, well, SFC may be watching, especially if your company is a listed company. So that's why I will mention the role of SFC later on. And then apply relevant legislation, case law, and best practice recommendations to scenarios relating to shares, capital maintenance, and loans. Very simply put, this is about corporate finance. And my experience is that students generally, they are quite weak. Frankly, they are quite weak at the corporate finance law. So I bet you have to pay more attention to this part. And then last but not least, apply appropriate judgment when presenting advice on structural and legal issues in the relevant form. And here's a remark here. The cases could be particularly complex and complicated in the case of corporate restructuring, for example, takeover and privatization. And we will go to that in a moment. Well, I'm sure that quite a number of you will have seen this picture, this diagram, because Dr. Mack and Professor Yun, they also showed you last night. Well, this is the competency framework designed by the CGI. And this is about how you practice your knowledge based on what you believe. And in taking this CGQP examination, of course, you're going to learn professional knowledge. But what you practice will based on your values. For example, if you know that, even if you understand pretty much about, say, the listing rules and the laws, you know that a new amendment has been made to company law. But you also understand that your CEO, your chair, they are not impressed. They are thinking, well, my role is to do business. I don't care about law. But as an effective ComSec, you know that the company must fulfill the regulatory obligations. You know that must be done because this is what you believe. So that you have to take time to convince your chair, your CEO that, look, we have to plan ahead. And you have to provide sufficient information to inform the board that, look, this is what we have to do. And what will be the consequences if we fail to do. Okay, so this is what the competence framework is about. Well, important, the relative weight. Well, unfortunately, you can see that all five, or each component has a comparable weight. So it's hard to tell. It's hard to tell which one is more likely to appear in examination. Okay, well, so now we go to the syllabus. Well, first, the sources of company law and governance. Well, ladies and gentlemen, if this would be your very first law exam, well, I am very proud to tell you that this is a common law jurisdiction, and that you have to cite case law in exam. Not just you have to refer to the company's ordinance and maybe the Securities and Futures Ordinance, And many important case law principles, like those relating to directors' duties, they are still in the form of case law. You have to cite case name. But I think we can give a good news because there's a list of cases.
Yes, there's a case list, and that may I ask? Some students will ask if I cannot remember the case name or I cannot remember the exact the statute number. Would it be okay that I just write my understanding and then I get marks as well?
Well, first of all, the usual disclaimer applies. I'm not the examiner. Yeah. But back in the campus, when I'm marking papers, all I want my students to do is to tell me, well, where do you know this principle came from? And sometimes you just give me, say, part of the case name, or maybe the name of the defendant or the name of the plaintiff, making sure that, you know where it came from. Yeah. And section number, well, you don't have a list of section numbers, but I personally, I don't care too much about the section number. But now you know that reasonable examiners, usually they don't need you to cite the whole citation. You cite, say, the name of the defendant, the name of the plaintiff, or the name of the company. But usually that would be enough. Okay. Well, business structure. Well, basically in Hong Kong we see three forms of business association: sole traders, partnership, and company. And well, company, of course, is the major focus of this course. And Hong Kong is very special. Hong Kong, as an international financial center, we have many non-Hong companies, especially listed companies on Hong Kong Stock Exchange. Many of them, I think an overwhelming majority of them, I think it's close to 80%, they are not Hong Kong companies. But don't get it wrong, some parts of the Hong Kong company law still apply to those non-Hong companies, especially those about minority shareholders protection. Right. Well, charity. I just said at the beginning that we don't have any laws on charity, but the IRD, the Inland Revenue Department, they recognize charitable institutions, and if you are one of them, you'll be given tax exemption. So you may want to know the definition of charitable institutions as defined by the IRD. Okay. Well, corporate personality, you have to know what it is. A company is a separate legal person. It enjoys the same rights that we natural persons can enjoy generally. And you have to know the role of the company's registry as well. Because to form a company, you have to make a registration with the registry. And articles of association is the highest law within the company. So you have to make sure that you understand Schedule 2. Well, I want you to make a remark here. That is very important. Because usually in the exam, the companies are assumed to have adopted Schedule 2. You have to know, you have to understand what the important provisions in the schedule. Okay. Well, legally binding company. For example, you have to know how a company can make a deed. A deed is a contract under seal. We natural persons and legal persons, we make this in very different way. Well, you have to know that. Okay. And well, we come to directors. Well, you have to understand how directors are appointed under the articles, and how they can be reappointed. Usually, you know that they are reappointed in AGM. How directors could be disqualified. Disqualification is not a very popular topic, but you have to understand what it is. Okay, and how a director could be removed under the company's ordinance and articles of association. Well, board of directors, they are the major decision makers. And in this context, the company secretary has many important roles to play. In the context of company law, you can imagine that ComSec is the major advisor on company law to the board. You cannot expect the board members to be good at company law, but everyone in the boardroom can look up to the ComSec because ComSec is perhaps the only professional in the boardroom. Well, director's duties. well, perhaps the most important part, because in exam, you can expect at least one or even two questions about directors' duties. Well, significant controllers, as far as the membership is concerned, significant controllers register is a new development. So you have to note that you know that this register is different from the register of members. And how to become members? To become members of a company limited by guarantee and to become a shareholder of a company limited by shares are different. You have to note, well, take note of this. Well, company meeting, GM equals to AGM and GM. Mathematically, it doesn't make sense. But this is a legal position in Hong Kong. We have two types of general meeting, and they are AGM and GM. And you have to understand every step, every procedure required to convene a valid AGM and GM. Okay. Well, members' remedies. This part is closely related to directors' duties. So you cannot study just one part without the other. Why minority shareholders, they need protection? Well, perhaps they have many naughty directors in the boardroom. Directors which will breach every duty known to company law. So that's why they need protection. And remember, those provisions relating to protection, they apply to both Hong Kong and non-Hong Kong companies. And the winding up is also remedy. It's also remedy. Because in the family business, for example, if the mutual trust and confidence is totally broken, the court will agree that this company has no other option but to go to liquidation. Well, Section D is about corporate finance. As I said at the beginning of this section, generally students, they are weak at this part. So you may want to make a note to yourself. Okay. For example, many students, they tend to think that if I have cash in the account, I can declare dividends. Look, I have making profits for 3 consecutive years. But perhaps under the true legal position is you still cannot because you have not yet made sufficient distributable profits. Okay, so somehow that is not your common sense. But as I said earlier, well, these are the ground rules. Directors, they have to make decisions based on Hong Kong company law. Okay, well, charges. My impression is we often see questions asking students, do you think this is a fixed charge or floating charge? Please define, is it a fixed or floating charge? And what would be the legal consequences if you failed to register a charge within time? Okay, so these are popular topics. Well, this part, capital D, Section D, is about corporate transparency. A company has to keep a lot of registers, like register of directors, members, company secretaries, charges, and most of them, they're open to members inspection. So you have to know what registers must be kept and where they should be kept. And AGM, in AGM, various reports must be given, and you have to know that directors' report and auditors' report, they must be provided to the members for the purposes of AGM, and note the role of the auditors as well. Well, market abuse. There are several forms of market abuse recognized by SFO, but for this course, we need you to focus on insider dealing. You don't see provisions on insider dealing in the company's ordinance because it is an offense recognized by the Securities and Futures Ordinance. Well, part E is very complicated, very complicated. Corporate restructuring. Well, how to do a takeover or how to effect a privatization? 2 ways: scheme arrangement and general offer. Scheme arrangement is a very complicated process, but over the common law world, scheme arrangement has become a very popular popular way to privatize or at least to take over a company. And stamp duty saving is a major reason. And you may expect that you may see a question on scheme, and that scheme is used to privatize a company. And in this case, and if the company is a listed company, you have to take note that the takeovers code may apply. And quite often students would forget that in this context, takeovers code is also relevant. Okay, and well, last but not least, liquidation and dissolution. You may be asked to advise the company in the question whether they should whether they can undergo members voluntary liquidation, or maybe they can only go to what? Go to creditors voluntary liquidation. You have to advise the parties. Yeah, thank you, Lisa. Well, examination. Oh, well, you hate this part, I'm sure. Examination paper structure. Okay, you have 3 hours to write, and but remember, you have 15 minutes to read. Okay, to read the paper, and for section 8, you are going to answer all the 5 questions there. They are short questions, but don't overlook this. Don't underestimate section 8. Don't think that well, they're just short questions, because for short questions, you either make it, you hit it, or miss it. And for section B, you have a choice. You are going to attempt any three out of the 4 questions, and you can expect that those section B questions may contain short cases, or it could be essay, but you should be fully prepared that they are short cases. Well, tips, but it's more about examination techniques. First, understand the syllabus fully, because don't think that well, I think I'm going to study directed studies, minority shelters protection, meetings, and then I can close the study text. Don't do that. You have to understand the whole syllabus, because the examiner may mix issues, where it's possible, may mix issues in the same question. Okay, so don't intentionally. Well, this is my own alarm. It reminds me of time management, something that we'll talk about in a moment. And you have to understand the requirements of the examination as well. For example, don't write in pencil. Every year we see students writing with pencil, and then marks deducted, and then it costs you what? Some unwanted consequences. Okay, as Professor Yin and Dr. Max said yesterday, we'll practice with the exam papers, and sometimes you can also use the papers from the IQS. For example, company law. Well, basically, it is just the same as before. So the past paper from IQS will be very, very relevant. Okay, attend the exam technique workshop, and start your revision early. Don't procrastinate. The time is always now. The time is always now. Okay, don't think that well, this week I have to do this or that. If you have a one hour today, well, do it. If you have say 2 hours tomorrow, do it. Don't wait for the best time. The best time is always now. And what are you going to study with? Of course, you start with the study test, the study pack, right? The honor materials, and I especially recommend CSJ to you, our own journal, because it covers the most recent development. And newspapers, academic journals, or even practice notes from account firms or law firms, or they can also inform you of the most recent development. Yes, of course, right. Yeah. Our own guidance notes. Research reports. So you have a lot to read. So that's why you have to start your revision early. Well, structure your answers in a logical way. Professor Yin and Dr. Mack also talked about that point yesterday. Well, manage your time wisely. Just 1 or 2 good answers cannot guarantee you a pass. Okay, don't think that I know perfectly question 3 and what question 4 is about, and then you spend too much time on them. Okay, and then you do not leave sufficient time for the remaining questions. And then usually you know that the total study time for each course is 200 hours. good luck. And usually good luck comes with early preparation.
Well, we are changing to the second module. So I would like to remind our students, from time to time, we have the bulletin board update. And that is very important, in particular, if you are preparing for your own work or for your study, because all the updates in the rules and regulations relevant to charter secretaries and charter governance professionals will be there. So always have a look of the bulletin board update.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, now we start with corporate governance. Thank you. Well, this module is to provide you knowledge you need to be a chief advisor to the board, to the stakeholders on the best practice in corporate governance, and to a facilitator for systematic application of good governance practice across a wide range of organizations. It's a bit unlucky, unfortunately, that this is called corporate governance, because for a while people would have suggested, should we change it to enterprise governance or organizational governance? Because not just commercial organizations, but the NGOs, charities, they all need good governance. I understand that well, in United Kingdom, CGI, they have certificate courses on academy governance, healthcare governance, charity governance. Right. And in recent years, the Hong Kong government has spent, well, a lot of resources to promote good corporate governance among the sports associations in Hong Kong. Well, these are the learning outcomes. You have to know how to research and apply on the growing and global, regional, local information sources on corporate governance. Well, I think last night we have received a question from the participants last night. And one question is, why does our study test cover so much UK materials? Well, this is the answer. Because good corporate governance is not territorial. Company law is territorial, but good governance is not. You can always refer to the good practices from the United Kingdom, from Singapore, or wherever. Okay, so that's why this is listed as the #1 learning outcome. And then secondly, you have to know you must be able to advise on directives duties, on the especially important is effectiveness of the board. And this is what CG is about. CG here in this module is a system. It's a system being used to make sure that the board will be effective. Thirdly, you have to know to apply the concepts of disclosure, especially disclosure relating to financial reporting and CSR. And we all know that now ESG reporting has become a very hot topic in recent years. Okay. And risk management. Well, you see directives duties, you see risk management, you see everything in this module, because this is the mother of all. This is corporate governance. So that's why you even see the shadow of SM. I mean strategic management in this module as well. So that's why you have to what? You have to be very careful with this, the relative weights. You see that risk management, of course, in part 2 of our scheme, it is an independent course. But in this module, it only occupies 10% of the relative weight. So you have to allocate your revision time wisely. So this is the same competency framework. The basic message is, as an effective company secretary, you practice your professional knowledge based on what you believe. Section 8. First, definition. Bad news. Actually, we don't have a universal definition.
We have a lot of international reports.
Right, right. And you need to know, well, how we in Hong Kong, or how say UK, Singapore would define corporate governance. So you have to bear this in mind. Theories and approaches. The study text will introduce a lot of theories to you. But in my opinion, the most important theory is agency theory. And you have to take note of what? The implications from the agency theory.
So this is derived from the company law.
Right, right. So you must do well, sufficiently well in company law, because that is the most important component. You see company law in CG, you see company law in board dynamics and CSC as well. You see company law everywhere. And rule-based versus principle-based. The UK system, or generally in the common law world, the most commonly used approach is the principle-based. And the most representative example is the comply or explained approach to the application of the CG code. But in some other jurisdictions, like US, they tend to put everything in law. I can give you an example. We all know that after the Enron scandal, the US, they make the SOX, the Sarbanes-Oxley Act, and under that act, CFO and CEO, they have to provide a personal certification on the sufficiency of the financial statements. That's a legal requirement. But in Australia, that is put in the CG code. So that is the same requirement, but one country has put in law, but the other country has put it in the code. Well, development CG is about history. Well, ladies and gentlemen, usually development of law and development of regulations is path dependent. Simply put, do you have enough scandals to trigger further reform? So that part will enable you to understand the development. Okay. Well, role of ComSec. Well, not just in CG, but you see even more roles of ComSec in board dynamics. Sometimes ComSec should act as an advisor on company law, and sometimes ComSec should be there to act as a conscience of the board. Right, right. Well, what if the board is talking about a proposal, a project, a contract, and apparently the executive directors, they want to take advantage of the possible legal loophole, and the board is inclined to listen to the CEO, but here at this moment the ComSec should rise up and alert and tell the board, especially the chair, that look, we may cause a legal troubles or at least reputational troubles to the company. Okay. Well, other governance issues like family governance, well, that is important. Our study text only has about around 3 pages on family governance, but I strongly suggest you to read the CSJ and other reference materials to understand more about. Right, right. Look, this is Hong Kong, and generally in Asia, we have a lot of big family businesses. Okay, and note that as I said earlier, CG applies to NGOs or other non-commercial enterprises as well. For example, Ocean Park. We know the Ocean Park is not in great form recently. And look, Ocean Park has its own CG code. Well, you can do a comparison. You can compare their code with the HKICS CG code, and then you can see a difference. And well, that can give you that comparison will give you a lot of insights. Well, directors' duties, well, is covered by Hong Kong company law. So if you have done well, in Hong Kong company law, then when you proceed to CG, proceed to board dynamics and the CSC, and then you'll find it easier. Well, roles and membership of the board. You have to take note of the roles of different directors. Like, what should be the role of executive directors, independent non-executive directors, chairman in the board? Look, here we don't just look at their duties, we look at their roles. For example, independent non-executive directors, they should act as I would say, a source of constructive challenge. In other words, you are going to do that job. You are going to challenge the executive directors to make sure that they have fully considered their proposal. Right, and of course that road is not welcome by the executive directors. So that's why we need that module called Board Dynamics, because definitely how directors they interact in the boardroom will affect the effectiveness of the board. And we'll go to the role of the chairman, I think, in Board Dynamics in greater detail. Chairperson's role is the most important. The chairman to the board is just like the manager to a football club. We often see that it is the same club with the same players. Why the results are very different? Because now the team has a new manager. If you are a Manchester United fan, like I am, you know what I'm talking about.
I'm a Liverpool fan, so I know what Liverpool is doing now.
Well, very true, very true. Well, section B, balance, conversation, and succession planning. Structure and process do matter. Ladies and gentlemen, if you start with Hong Kong company law, what you have learned from that module is directors, they make decisions, they go to meetings with their legal duties. But in the real world, fulfilling the legal requirements will not guarantee good decisions. The structure and the process they matter. And this is one of the main themes of this module. And on this matter, you always start with our Hong Kong CG code. The Hong Kong CG code is a set of best practices for running an effective board. If you followed the code, you stand a better chance to have an effective board. But there's no guarantee that your decisions will always be great every time. But at least you have this is what you can do, what you should do, because they contain a lot of best practices in this code. And well, just like our learning outcomes have mentioned, you have to know what our neighbors or competitors they are doing, especially Singapore, for example, and UK as well. They have, I would say, they have quite substantially revamped their CG codes. And I'm sure that by reading those codes, you will gain a lot of new ideas and new insights. And let me repeat again, corporate governance is not territorial. It's not like company law. Well, here in section B, I think CEO succession is perhaps the biggest decision for the board of directors. So you must be prepared for what? For a question on CEO succession. What are the best practices, and like what should be the role of the nomination committee in this matter? Well, board effectiveness and healthy board dynamics is a key. So that's why we have the next module. And as reading materials, I can suggest one more to you, and that is the HKICS guidance for boards and directors. You can see that as a user manual of the Hong Kong CG code. And then the FRC, FRC here means the Financial Reporting Council. The FRC guidance on board effectiveness is a user guide to the UK code. And if you are going to read just one jurisdiction's materials, in addition to Hong Kong, I would suggest UK. Disclosure is the focus of section C. You have to note the role of the audit committee and the role of the auditor and its report. Well, now you can see repetition. In company law, we mentioned auditor, and now we mention again. And I assure you that I'm going to talk about the role of auditor a few minutes later. Why we keep on repeating that is because, well, there are several dimensions of the same issue. When we talk about auditor in company law, we talk about the appointment and liability, legal powers of auditor. But when we proceed to CG, we talk about the governance perspective, like how to facilitate better communication between the audit committee and the auditor, for example. Okay, so that's why we often see well, the same issues appearing in different modules. Well, CSR, ESG reporting. Well, I'm sure that these topics they need no well, introduction and emphasis. Okay, I think we can go to D. Well, D, risk management. Now you see strategy, this word. Okay, because strategy, if there are two functions of the board to perform, one is to get to employ a great CEO, and the other is to fix the strategy for the company. And what risks your company would be facing actually depends on what strategy you take. So risk management and strategy, actually, they are sides of the same coin. Okay, and the CG code from 216 has put this down as a new requirement. The board has an ongoing duty to monitor risks. Okay, and different companies will have different practices, and some companies will, for example, like banks generally, they would employ a new C-suite officer called the CRO, the Chief Risk Officer. But some other companies, they may tend to do that in other ways, like ask the AC to meet more frequently to oversee risk. So that's why that will echo the point we made earlier. Good practices are not territorial. If it fits your company's culture, if it fits your company's nature, well, they will be relevant. Okay. Well, standard setting body, you have to know generally about, say, the COSO framework. But I guess you don't need to spend too much time because the relative weight is only 10%.
We have the subject.
Right.
It will be in full scale in the risk management module.
Yeah, you studied that module in part 2.
Yeah, yesterday Dr. Mac talked about it.
Right.
All right.
And you have to know generally what is the role of audit committee in risk management, and how to set up a whistleblowing arrangement, because whistleblowing arrangement on reporting financial irregularity is now required by the code. Crisis management and a disaster recovery plan. Well, this is very relevant to Hong Kong now. When the company falls into a crisis, well, usually the directors, they have no time to react. So it would be very nice if they can foresee it, and if they can, well, draft the protocols, or draft the plans, and so that when crisis happened, all they need to do is what? Take out the well planned out protocol and then follow it. And I think one of the functions of the ComSec is to make sure that the directors, they would do that. Okay. Well, what is long? Shareholders' rights and engagement. And engagement generally, we don't just mean GM. In AGM, of course, you can engage shareholders. But now we have seen the arrival of the active hedge funds in Hong Kong. Okay, and those were active hedge funds. They're attacking listed companies in Hong Kong now, and this is what we call, this phenomenon is called shareholder activism. But don't get me wrong. I'm not saying that activist shareholders must be very aggressive. No. What we want investment funds to do is to what? Is to perform your role as a share owner. In the context of shareholder activism, we tend to call those people not as shareholder. You don't just hold the shares, you own the shares. That shows that you hold a long-term perspective as an owner. And on that matter, the SFC has drafted the principles of responsible ownership, and that can enlighten the investment funds, like the NPF funds, on how to perform their role as the share owners, And you may know that these principles are actually based on the Stewardship Code in the United Kingdom. Okay, you need to know how to design the remuneration packages for directors, especially for executive directors, to make sure that the package will not send wrong incentives to the executives. And RC, of course, has a role to play here. Well, exam format, the same. In section 8, you see 5 questions, and you have to answer all of them. And in the section B, you see 4 questions, and you are going to answer any three out of those 4. And be prepared that they could be cases. The same tips. And without, I don't want to repeat every one of them, but if I'm going to repeat just 1 or 2, you know which 2 I'm going to repeat. Start your revision early, because when you do a revision, sometimes you may realize that, well, I'm quite weak at this part. I need to spend more time. Okay, and so don't procrastinate. Don't delay your revision plan. And your study materials. Well, CG is different from company law. If I were still taking company law, I guess I could simply rely on the study text, because quite likely it will contain everything I need. But CG is different, because CG is about practices, and you can learn a lot more best practices from our research report, from newspapers, or from, well, anywhere. So I do think that you have to make sure that you have sufficient time, not just to read the study text, but also the additional material.
So does it mean that they need to have very extensive readings?
Right. And as Louise has suggested, you should also make sure that you are familiar with our practice notes.
So have a look of our publications on the website, a lot of guidance notes and research reports.
Right.
Yeah. So shall we go to the the corporate secretaryship and compliance?
Mm-hmm.
With all these 3 subjects are in part 1 modules. Okay. So pass to you.
Okay, here we go. Usual disclaimer. I'm not a fortune teller, so I don't know what is going to happen in the exam. But I can give you an introduction of what is important in the syllabus. Well, this CSC is interesting, because if you cover the title, if you just look at the syllabus and the learning outcomes,
it's a very long syllabus.
Right, and you see, well, many topics are being repeated. For example, like the second bullet point here, this module is designed to ensure that the company operates and complies in accordance with good governance practices and law and rules and code. So does it mean that you will see well, some part of CG and some part of company law here? The answer is yes. The answer is yes. But this course, this module, you can see it as the compliance phase of corporate governance, because this part, definitely the company secretary will take a very leading role here, because the ComSec is the one to make sure that the company will comply with the relevant laws, like Companies Ordinance, SFO, Tax Affairs Code, listing rules, and the list can go even longer. Well, I think I can leave the learning outcomes to your own reading, because actually they are quite similar to the CG and the common law learning outcomes. Well, shall we go to the relative weight? I don't need to tell you which part is the most important. The second part, okay? Just the section B occupies would take up 40%, almost half of the total almost half of the total weight. So this part will be the longest. With the same competency framework, well, you can see that the same bullet point appears many times. In relation to directors, board practices, members, I said it is largely what? covered by CG or the company law. Well, I don't mean that. I don't mean that. Well, they are very simple. I don't mean that there's nothing new in here. That is not what I mean. Okay. In fact, what I want to assure you is that will make this course, more difficult. One question we received yesterday is that why CSC and its predecessor, why the passing rate was low? And that is the reason, because it's a combination. CSC is a combination of many other modules like company law and corporate governance and with some board dynamics. Okay, so if you have laid down a good foundation in company law and CG, when you go on and proceed to CSC, you will find it easier. But if the case is you barely pass company law, you barely pass corporate governance, and then you may not pass this time. And CG issues, corporate governance issues, they are multi-dimensional. For example, if the board is going to discuss a connected transaction, and the board is going to have a meeting on that, if you look at this from the company law perspective, your focus is how to avoid conflict of interest, and what the articles are about this. Can that director attend a meeting, or can he or she vote? Well, that's the company law perspective. But if you move on to CG, the CG code will give you a system, a set of best practices on that matter. And if you go to the CG code said that, look, this meeting must be a physical meeting. Maybe you have fulfilled all the legal requirements from the law perspective, but from the CG lens, this meeting must be a physical meeting. Don't think that you naughty directors, you can just force the others to sign up a written resolution and then walk out of the troubles. And then if you go to BD, board dynamics, it becomes another perspective. At that meeting, perhaps some directors, they have some of their personal biases, and that may distort the decision-making process. And as an effective ComSec, you have to understand your own director's biases and try to put arrangement in places to mitigate those biases. And then coming back to CSC, since in my example, that meeting could be controversial. And then you as a effective ComSec, you have to know how to prepare the meeting notes professionally. So my point is, this is the reason why you see the same topics appearing many times, because those issues, they have different faces. Section B, company compliances. Well, please note that section B is the longest, and it takes up most of the relative weight. So if you're not doing well on this part, you are not going to pass, frankly. Okay. Well, again, company compliance here covers most part of the syllabus. Most part of the company law, from registration of the company, to even minority shareholders protection. Right. So that's why the passing rate is low, because you almost see the whole of company law in CSC. But in CSC, the major focus is the compliance part. So you have to note the procedural requirements on the matter, on the issues. Okay, and annual reports. You have to know what contents should be put in the CG report, in the ES3 report, and in the director's report, because usually it will be the ComSec to take charge of the drafting. External audit, again, you see it in every module. But as we have explained to you, the same subject matter may have different faces. The example I've used before is, from the legal perspective, you have to know how to appoint, remove auditor, and what powers and duties, liabilities they have. And from the CG perspective, you have to know how to make sure that, there is a healthy and effective communication between AC and the auditors. For example, AC will be the gatekeeper on the provision of non-audit services.
So AC means the audit committee.
Oh, right, audit committee.
Some of them may not have touch on to
Right. Yeah. Thank you, Lisa. Yeah, by AC, I mean the audit committee, And now it has become a textbook example that perhaps one of the reasons leading to the downfall of Enron and well, one of the then big five, I don't want to mention name, but you know which firm I was talking about. Why the firm went down with Enron? One reason was that it's believed that at that time, that firm, they earned even more money from the non-audit service, from the audit service. So it was believed that, well, that firm has somehow compromised their standard on audit. So we are still on B. Well, this part is a bit new. Oh, no, not new. Same. You see the same topics in company law. Yeah. Okay, the listing process, the IPO. You have to note how many ways of listing shares on the Hong Kong Stock Exchange, and what are the roles of the key players, like what the sponsor is going to do, and what the reporting accountants is going to do in the process. And then once again, you see insider dealing. You see insider dealing everywhere. Well, ladies and gentlemen, even though for the examination purposes, what you need to pay attention to is insider dealing. But look, you take this examination to become a professional concept. You don't just take the exam for the sake of the exam. So you may want to know what are the other forms of market abuse, like price rigging, market manipulations, and so that's why you have to read more than the study text. Mm-hmm. And that is one of the small advices for you.
This is the subjects for most of our members to be the professionals and for their career development.
Right. Because it makes no point if you pass examination, but you have not acquired the required skill set for the company secretary. Okay, so minutes. Oh, yeah. Well, how to prepare minutes professionally. You may recall in my example, perhaps the meeting is very controversial, and then it could be quite political to prepare a professional minutes. But minutes are very important. Well, ladies and gentlemen, don't think that the minutes will only be inspected by the board only. In fact, under the SFO, the SFC, the Securities and Futures Commission, has a power to ask you for the board minutes, especially if the SFC is wondering, perhaps some naughty directors have breached their duties, and the SFC can exercise their power to ask you for the minutes. And under the company's ordinance, shareholders can go to the court and ask for an inspection order, and by way of that order, they can inspect your board minutes. And the board minutes, if they have sufficiently professionally record down the arguments discussed in the boardroom, then it is a way for you to prove to the court that, Your Honor, look, even though I vote against that matter, but still it has been passed. But if you look at these minutes, you can see my dissenting argument. And this is the reason why I want you to relieve my liability under Section 903 of the company's ordinance. So don't think that minute taking is a very boring and trivial thing. No, it can relate to important legal consequences. So that's why minutes must be prepared professionally. This is the point I just mentioned to you. One part of B is about the oversight by regulators. SFC can exercise its power under Section 179 to ask you for information. SFC not just can ask your company for information, but also can go to your auditors, can go to your banks for information as well. Regulation and disclosure. Well, obviously, personal data protection is very important. everyone is talking about the general data and protection regulations. And in relation to this matter, cybersecurity has become a very important topic, not just here, right, in risk management as well. Okay, well, non-Hong Kong company. In Hong Kong, we have many non-Hong Kong companies, especially on the stock market. So that's why as a concept of listed company, you have to what? You have to be well-versed at that jurisdiction's law and also Hong Kong company law. For example, if you are a concept of a Cayman Islands company, you know that how your directors would be appointed or removed would be based on the articles and also that jurisdiction's law. But in relation to minority shareholders protection, remember, the Hong Kong Companies Ordinance will apply to you. Well, meeting. Is it boring? No. In fact, I think that is very practical, because as a concept, you are going to make the arrangement for the AGM. From the company law module perspective, you need to know how to convene a valid GM or AGM. But in this module, you have to take note of how to conduct the GM as well. For example, you may know that recently the Hong Kong court has released a judgment on a quite high-profile case, and in that case, the chairman has disqualified a majority shareholder from voting. So this is about the conduct of the meeting. And there could be some lesser but also practical issues, like under what circumstances can the chair of the GM adjourn the meeting or postpone the meeting? Okay, so even though you see meeting once again, but here the focus is how to conduct a valid GM. Right. And then secondly, board meeting. Okay. The legal requirements on board meetings, well, frankly, they are not that complicated. But the most important issue, I think, is how to manage the board members' conflict of interest. And the starting point is always the Articles of Association. Well, believe it or not, it is possible for the articles to provide that even the director in that conflict situation can attend and vote. Because if you look at the Companies Ordinance, the ordinance only states that you need to make disclosure. But the ordinance never stops you from what? From voting. Okay? Because the lawmakers take it as what? See as an internal matter. It is your articles to decide whether that director can vote or not. So, have I given you sufficient reasons to read Schedule 2? At least 1 or 2 times before the examination. Because generally, GM questions will heavily rely on Schedule 2. If you found that you are going to attempt a question on meeting, but you have not read Schedule 2, you don't know what to do. So that's the reason why, one of the reasons why the passing rate is low. Hopefully. Hopefully. Well, shares, once again, the same topic, but this time it has a new dimension, CGQP. You have to know what the CGQP is about and how listed company, how to work under the CGQP system. And you also need to know how to pass the share option scheme under the listing rules. Well, continuing obligations. Well, this part will take up 20% of the total marks. Originally, continuing obligations of listed company is not in the UK counterpart, but this part is so good that we transferred it from the company secretaryship in the IQS to the CSC.
It's just that we maintain this important part in the subject.
Right, this is so important. And basically, you need to know what Chapter 3, Chapter 14, and 14A of the main board listing rules is about. And at this moment, you may be wondering, well, David, how about GM rules? I'm working for a GM company. The chapter numbers are different, but basically the provisions are exactly the same. Chapter 3 is about the continuing obligations, like when you are going to make disclosure. 14 is about notifiable transactions, And for this matter, you must be prepared to what? To do some basic math, because you are going to apply the 5 size tests to determine the nature of the notifiable transactions. But it's just simple math. It's not calculus, simple math. Chapter 14A is a big headache because this chapter is about the connected transactions. Everyone, when they read chapter 14A for the first time, they want to kill themselves.
Very complicated.
Right, or to burn the whole chapter 14A, because chapter 14A will start with a very complicated definition of the associates and the connected parties. But you have to make sure that you know what those definitions, not just for examinations, but as an effective company secretary of a listed company, you have to know whether the company is going to enter into a connected transaction. Because if you fail to define it as such, and if you don't implement section 14.8, you breach the listing rules, and the exchange people will talk to you, and consequences may follow.
Yeah, I would just remind the students that from time to time, keep an eye on our CPD seminars, that we always have this notifiable transaction, continuing obligations, and in particular, connected transactions. We always have this in our CPD seminars.
And I can give you a strong recommendation to attend those seminars, because in Hong Kong we don't have much written materials like textbook on the listing rules. So you will learn more from the practitioner's experience.
Yeah, refers to the Q&A of the stock exchange.
Right. Again, you see 2 sections. In section 8, you will find 5 questions. You are going to do all of them. And let me repeat again. Don't underestimate section 8, because since they are short, you are going to do it on the hit it or miss it basis. And in section B, you can expect to see some short cases, and you have a choice. You are going to attend any 3 out of those 4. Well, this time I think our time management has improved. Oh, not yet. I'm not finished. Yeah. I failed.
Yeah, repeating. There's important things taught 2 more times so that our students will remember that.
Always start your revision
early.
And good luck will follow with early preparation.
Okay. So, and that Dr. Wu has given us a very good integrated learning between the subjects, from company law to corporate governance and to corporate secretaryship. They are all in the part 1 of the CGQP. So now we go to the board dynamics, the most interesting subject.
The usual disclaimer applies. Well, boardroom dynamics. Make it short. It is a combination. It's a combination of CG practices and organizational psychology, or organizational behavior. Because it's about what? How you can make sure that individual behavior is effective, and when they attend meetings together, they also will become an effective group. One of the biggest puzzles in the CG field is that why a company, having fulfilled all the legal obligations, followed the code, why still that company failed dearly, and why they still make some obvious mistakes. And that's very simple, because a system, no matter how comprehensive, how good it is, but it must be carried out well in a satisfactory way. Right, by people. Look, maybe I have so-called many independent directors in my boardroom, but what if they all are my childhood friends? Friendship is not considered as a criterion affecting independence. As a chair, I can invite my childhood friends, my buddies, to attend the boardroom, and they all are my cheerleaders. And in this case, the boardroom, this one is not going to be effective. So we are going to find out how we can make use of the advanced knowledge from organizational behavior, psychology, to make sure that the CG system will be effected in a satisfactory way. You can see that I'm smiling because 2 years ago, I think it's 2 years ago, when I first read the draft of the syllabus, I said to myself, wow, people who are good at corporate governance, they may not be good at organizational behavior. And those are good at organizational behavior and psychology, they may not know enough about it. I think so. I agree. But as you can see here, among the learning outcomes, among the features of design, this one is interesting. Here, ComSec or CG professionals are supposed to what? To make use of knowledge to influence and effect change in their roles. So this is going to be a very, very practical course because you are going to learn how to make changes, effect changes, of course, for the good reason in the boardroom. Well, first, the first learning outcome, yes, you have to understand, well, the importance of board dynamics. A good system in place is not enough. You have to have good people to enforce that system. And understand, well, the different phases of boardroom dynamics. Of course, you can basically divide into what? Constructive side and destructive side. And if you're a football manager, if you're the best players in the world, there's no guarantee that they will conquer the world football. And sometimes you will see what a team, even though they're players, they're less glamorous, but the results are very good because they have good team relationship. They have good dynamics among the players.
Iceland can win.
Exactly. Iceland is a very good example.
Yeah.
I think just the new territories has more people than the whole Iceland.
Yeah.
Well, thirdly, critically evaluate how boardroom dynamics may affect the quality of relationships and the decision making and culture in the boardroom. And that is I would say the most important thing. Directors, they are decision makers, and you have to what, as a ComSec, as an advisor on CG for them, you have to make sure that the boardroom process, the boardroom relationship are in good shape, so that the board are going to make decisions, well, based on the good process. Apply formal and informal methods to positively influence the dynamics. Well, when we talk about the ways or the methods we can use to change the dynamics, you will be thinking, perhaps, once again, we are going to start from the CG code. Well, that's for sure. But we can also what? We can also make use of what? Some informal methods. If you go to the syllabus, well, actually, we are going to that point soon. We'll also cover what? This module also cover what? Setting plan. Setting plan is important. I can assure, I'm a director myself of 2 listed companies. I can assure you that setting plan is important. And then the calendar is important as well. How to plan out the days of the meeting. Everyone in Hong Kong, in Central can confirm to you that if you are going to have the AC meeting in the morning, and then you have the board meeting in the afternoon to approve the annual results, and then why the 2 meetings on that day is because it's a deadline. If the board is not going to approve the results that day, the board, right, we are going to breach the listing rules. So in this case, how can your directors be effective? Because there's no time for directors to follow up on some important matters. So formal and informal ways can be used. Well, ladies and gentlemen, if you go to the ICSA guidance notes, of course now it's called CGI. They have their materials will cover what? One informal point on board dynamics, and that is, when are you going to have your board dinner? In Hong Kong, usually directors will meet in a Monday morning, and then everyone is rushing back to the office because they have a lot of work on their desk. But in UK, at least from the perspective of ICRC, they will ask, would you want to have a board dinner before your meeting the next day, so that the INEFs, the EDs, the chair, they can mingle, or they first touch the water by informally talking about the issues, so that the meeting the next day can be more smooth. Okay, and there are many such informal ways to improve the board dynamics. Well, we have to wait. B and C together, they occupied 80%. So I personally, I don't think it helps a lot on your time allocation, because it means that you are going to study every part in great detail. Right. And in fact, sitting on this side of the table, we never suggest you to skip any from the syllabus.
A broad understanding of the whole syllabus.
Not just here, we are going to say something politically correct. It's also because it is possible for the examiner to mix issues in the same question. Okay, the same competency framework. Well, why board dynamics is because regulations, laws cannot guarantee board effectiveness. We have covered that point. And I think the study test has described board dynamics very, very well here. Board dynamics is about how boards behave and how they misbehave, rather than about what tasks they do. It's about how they discuss issues rather than what issues they discuss. What tasks they do, what issues they discuss will be decided by company law and corporate governance. Okay, but board dynamics is about what? It's about how they behave. As we mentioned, organizational psychology, OB, well, they play a very important role here. Are we being too academic by mixing psychology and regulations together? No. Here, I give you one example. It's a recent news. It's recent news from last year, from Australia. ASIC. ASIC means Australian Securities and Investment Commission. And they have launched a project to study how the boards will approach risk management in Australia. And for that project, ASIC sent organizational psychologists to interview the board members. And it's all reported that those psychologists, they are also they are also allowed to attend the board meetings to see how the board members will interact. So using psychology in board dynamics is not new. It's not new. And when you go through the CG syllabus in greater detail, you will know that board evaluation can be divided into internal and external evaluation. And in UK, you have to do it once in every 3 years, basically. And usually the external external evaluation, one part of it is to send observers to board meetings to see how the board members would interact. So using psychology in CG actually is not a new idea. Well, in relation to governance structure, well, I don't know whether you see that's good news or bad news. It's covered by CG. And you have to take note of the implications of the different CG structure on board dynamics. For example, are you going to have the chair who is also the CEO, or the CEO is an independent non-executive director, as we see in Australia and UK, or maybe your chairman is a retired CEO, and he or she stay put and serve as the chair, and now you're the new CEO. Well, these different structures will have different implications on the board dynamics. And on this, I recommend you to read an article called "Board Governance Depends on Where You Sit," and it is written by a Harvard professor called William George. And you can find that article on the website of McKinsey and Company. Okay, and that article covers the implications of CG implications of different board structure. Well, board directors' demographics, how it can influence the boardroom discussion? I got it from Bloomberg,
Yeah, this is nice.
This shows you that the heading is funny. Corporate directors get older, they hold their seats longer. I can imagine that. The situation is when the directors, when they're of similar age, when they know that they should be leaving the board at a similar time, but they don't want to leave the boardroom. So they've developed an implicit understanding that, well, look, we are NC members, and why don't we suggest we are reappointment so that you stay and I stay. Otherwise, you jump, I jump. So you can see that lack of diversity or generally demographics or different a particular structure, a composition in the boardroom will affect the board dynamics. Well, psychology rules in this course. In relation to board decision making, you have to consider what cognitive biases may obstruct the boardroom discussion and what can be used to remove those biases. The most common, popular example is groupthink. What is groupthink? It means that in this boardroom, somehow people, they are inclined to believe in certain things, so that if you speak something otherwise, you will be seen as disloyal. So you all, the people, they are what? They are somehow forced to what? To agree to anything proposed in the boardroom. And you can find more examples like sunk cost fallacies. I think we have experienced sunk cost fallacies. We all did. You make a bad decision. But that decision has been made, cost has been incurred, but you still throw good money after bad. And you fail to realize that, well, what is done is done. Bygones are bygones. And as an effective ComSec, you have to understand your own director's biases and make sure that you will put in arrangements to make sure that those biases will be managed in the boardroom decision making. Well, how to handle board conflict? Well, how to mount a constructive challenge in the boardroom? Well, as I see it, they are important topics because board directors, they are not supposed to be agreeable on everything. And a healthy level of dispute or argument in boardroom actually is healthy, but you have to manage it. How to manage? Like you find out what are the causes of the conflict, and then what can be done in relation to those causes of conflict. How to make a constructive challenge is always the most important function of the independent non-executive directors. But strangely, you don't find challenge this word in the CG code. But you find this word in other countries' code. So there must be a story behind, I guess. My personal view, I cannot represent HKICS on this matter. Well, how corporate culture would impact board dynamics and how to influence board culture? Well, now it has become an emerging trend that we recognize that culture would affect boardroom dynamics. So that's why in the UK CG code, it is explicitly stated that the board must make sure that there is a healthy culture, not just in the boardroom, but also generally in the organization. Well, diversity is important. Usually we'll talk about gender diversity, but make no mistake, we also consider ethnic, age, geographical diversity, or even personality. Right, expertise, and even personality. The second bullet point has been mentioned, how you design the board meeting. Physical, temporal, procedural, even technological considerations can matter. Yeah,
when we talk about we have the meetings, yeah. So we need to make use of most of the new technology.
Right. And the interaction through technology, of course, will be very different from that you see in the boardroom. Yeah. And ComSec, we have a lot to do here to make sure that, well, the interaction will be effective. And then, well, this part, effecting change. You can see that ComSec has been given several roles here, like invisible leader. Well, here, ComSec should make sure that there is leadership in the boardroom, especially exercised by the chair. The ComSec can also be seen as a talent manager. Like has our new directors received induction program, and our CPD programs, well, do the contents fit our needs? And is the board fulfilling all the CG requirements and legal requirements? And in that sense, the ComSec is a board consultant. And if you have say sufficient diversity in the boardroom, it means that there could be cultural clash. And ComSec should serve as a diplomat to make sure that the conflict should be contained at a healthy level. Well, team coach, well, this is interesting. Team building or coaching is an established topic in organizational behavior, but it finds application in the boardroom as well. Okay, and well, here the ComSec will make sure that, well, the personal effectiveness of directors could be improved. And last but not least, stress management. And directors, they often find themselves in stressful situation. Like what? I think now we have examples everywhere, all over the world. And building personal resilience is said to be one of the functions of the ComSec, at least from the BD perspective. And well, this is something new tonight: how to prepare a case study. In the previous modules, there's no case study.
Long case.
Long case. I'm sorry. Yeah, long case. This one is special. Long
this
case.
is a long case. The others maybe have some scenario case.
Right. This is a long case, and this long case, will be released to you 6 weeks before the examination, and you have a lot of time to read. But when you read the case, make sure that you give a context to yourself. Don't just read as an article. Try to understand the facts in a certain role, like how exec directors, independent directors, stakeholders would understand these facts, and then you can find the relevant issues easily this way. And focus your analysis by identifying 2 or more issues, because usually a decision will have what? Will have more than one implications. Like what? If the board is going to say adopt a new strategy, and similarly that strategy can tick most of the boxes, but note that if you take a new strategy, well, you may face different financial requirements, for example, and may bring different risks. So you have to make sure you know that what are the dimensions, what are the implications of that matter. Okay. Well, during the examination, well, consider possible options. I think Dr. Mack also stressed this point last night. Yeah. We markers, we often see students, they lay down the principles and then they jump to the conclusion without analysis, without options. Even in the boardroom, we directors, we like to see what? We like to see options. The exec directors, they propose, say, option A. They think it is the best. But directors would want to see, is there plan B? What is option B? And tell me what are the pros and cons on option A and B. So in examination, if time allows, you give advice, and if time allows, you can provide an alternative advice. Why that is recommended? Look, no matter how many pages you're going to see in that case, it is not enough. There must be some white spaces between the facts. And between the white spaces, you may need to make some assumptions. So different assumptions may affect your answers differently. So you have to bear that in mind. And make recommendations on the best solution with justification. Always refer to the facts. I just said that I myself, for one, I've seen too many answers jumping to the conclusion without analyzing the facts. Okay, and you may want to read the codes, because as I said, the codes contains a lot of best practices and will give you will give you a lot of insights, and analyze the facts, but don't spend too much time because you have to manage the time wisely. Even though the facts, you know it before, but the questions may surprise you. So spread your time or divide your time in a wise way among the questions. Well, In section 8, the questions will be based on the case, the long case, and you have a choice. You are going to answer 3 out of 4. But in section B, wow, the choice is much more limited. You have 2 questions, and you are going to answer just one of them. Same tips. The most important one: start the revision early.
So thank you, Davy, for a very interesting, informative, constructive, and showing all the relations and connections between all the subjects. In particular, it is very important for our members because this is the route they have to pass through for the knowledge area and become our member as one of the requirements. So, and that it was very helpful for their job and career. So if our students have questions about these 4 modules, please write to our student email, student@hkics.org.hk, and we will give a reply at the FAQ later. Tonight's, just like the last night and the first seminar, online seminar, all will be recorded, and then we will put onto the website later, and then we'll send notices to our students. And if you want to have a rerun of these and with all this information, I think tonight is very full for a lot of us, and then so you can review that again. I would like to remind the students that make use of the e-learning platform. If you have not yet registered with the Prime Law online platform, please do, and then check it out on our website for that path. And also, you can access all the past papers, pilot papers, as although we changed from IQS to CGQP, the simile is different, but the law doesn't change much for the past 2 years. And the company secretarial practice part is quite similar, but we add more elements in it. Corporate governance, quite similar. So you can also refer to certain past papers, how to look into the questions, how to prepare for your answers. But don't memorize the answers. You need to understand. Understand is fundamental. And that we also have the online examination technique workshop seminars, so you can enroll for it. And the last bit is that I would like to remind you of certain forthcoming activities. Already I mentioned the examination technique seminars in April. And then we also have the governance professionals information session. It's an online, we have invited 3 young professionals to share with us their route to membership and their experience, and that what are they looking for in future as the charter secretaries and charter governance professionals. And then we have another session mainly for the undergrads. It's the governance professionals career day. It's a rescheduled one. It will be held in June on a Saturday afternoon, the whole day. So for all these, just to remind you where you can find our workshops in events on the website. And these are all the information. So once you become our students and you finish or successfully complete the CGQP, then you will finish the first part of the route to membership. And with your relevant working experience and fit and proper person, and become our member, you will be proud to be a governance professional, and that you are one of the HKICS champion of governance. To contact us for more details, do so, and then check it out with all the information or that on our messages on the social medias. So thank you once again.
You're welcome, Lisa.
And that
My pleasure.
Good night to all, and that good luck to you. Thank you. Goodbye.